Hot dogs can roast with kilowatts.
All right, go ahead and start, guys.
Thank Mr. Mayor and Council for attending tonight, everyone else is here. Just to give a short reason that we're here tonight, back in 2019, when the substation project got brought up, Chris and I had a conversation about how when we were going out for the engineering, we'd like to go ahead and add additional generation into that engineering study. So that's what was presented to Luke's, and that's what they came up with. So we'll kind of get right into it right here. So first of all, why does the city own generation? So there's several reasons here. One of them being the ability to supply the town if the tie is unavailable. The tie would be our import into the city from Evergy's transmission. There can be many reasons that we could lose that: storm damage, vehicle accidents hitting poles, intentional damage, vandalism, or equipment failure, such as the regulator that caught on fire here a couple months ago just outside of town. That's when we had our last, that was in December when we had the main open up on us. Another thing that we could lose our tie for, or we could be curtailed, is rolling blackouts or curtailment from SPP. SPP is Southwest Power Pool. They are the ones that schedule all the generation in the center of the United States. They're the ones that schedule all of our load. So I know we all know about the February weather event. We know the towns around us, Lawrence and Topeka, some of them experienced anywhere from a 2 to 4 hour outage on 1 or 2 days of that week. That would be another example of why our tie wouldn't be available. Second reason that we own generation is capacity. So SPP requires us to secure capacity for the amount of our expected peak plus 12%. This is a way to ensure that there's enough generation to cover everyone's load. So there's a couple different types, several types of capacity or ways of getting it. The first one being our PPAs, or our power purchase agreements. Most of our power purchase agreements include some accredited capacity. We'll get into that a little further into the graphs on which SPPs have which amount. But another way of getting capacity is owning the generation asset. Right now, we're able to claim capacity on all 5 of our generators that are still operable. Every 3 years, we must prove that the unit is capable of producing the claimed capacity for 1 hour on a 95-degree day. That's our way of ensuring that our capacity we're claiming is actually, usable. The third way of obtaining capacity is to buy it. It's called paper capacity. We can purchase paper capacity from other generating facilities, such as other cities or other large generating entities. Today's price on paper capacity is trading at around $2.25 per kilowatt per month. Okay, so third reason for owning generation is through economics or grid stability. And when I talk about economics or grid stability, we're talking about our registered units. Our registered units are the units that are registered with SPP, and they can be dispatched on a daily basis through SPP. The 2 newer units at Power Plant 2 are both registered units. The 3 units at the downtown plant are emergency only, and they are not registered. So any of the registered units can be dispatched through SPP when they feel that it's needed for economics, meaning our offer curve to them to provide the energy is under what they'd be paying somebody else. So when the price gets up there and our units become in the money, then we can be dispatched. We can also be dispatched from them for transmission problems. Let's say the area around here is having transmission problems, and even though the price isn't high, which normally when there is transmission problems, the price does go up in that area, but if there's transmission problems where they can't get the power to us, then SPP can dispatch us for that. The second thing for economics is we can self-dispatch in real time. So what that means is, well, KMEA is another one that watches this. If they see the price in our area, or we see the price in our area skyrocket for some reason, then we can come online and try to take advantage of that situation, because we'll be paid for our output at whatever the real-time price is. That's not a common occurrence because it's really volatile. Real-time pricing is really volatile, and you know it may shoot up there. You bring the unit online, and then it'll go to a negative number. So that's not something that we generally do, but we do use it sometimes. We do a monthly maintenance run on each of our units, and so we sometimes look at what the real-time market price is, and we try to schedule those times when the price is higher, because we'll be getting reimbursed better for our monthly maintenance runs. The last reason is that it allows us an opportunity to participate as a wholesale buyer in an integrated market. And please, anybody has questions, ask at any time, and we can sort it.
You was talking about the paper capacity. What do we charge? What do we get? What's it costing us now?
Well, we don't buy any right now. We sell some, because we are long right now. So we're selling paper capacity right now at 2.25 per kilowatt per month. We're
So-
bringing in about $1,600 a month.
Is that would be about the same cost as that you're serving it to customers, to us?
No, that's
That's just a straight sale.
yeah, that's just, we have excess capacity right now. And within our EMP groups and within KMEA as a whole, we can sell, anyone who has excess capacity can sell it to the cities that need it. And right now, we're selling, I can't remember what the KWs are, but it figures out to be $1,500 roughly a month,
Is that a month?
per month, yes.
Just so I understand that, we're not generating capacity, that's excess capacity that we contracted for that we're not using.
No, it's the fact that we have an asset that can produce.
So what are we selling? We're not selling anything, we're producing ourselves.
We're not selling anything but paper.
That was my original question, I must not have asked it very well. So we contracted for probably a minimum that we have to pay, you know, is it, I guess it's Evergy or whoever our supplier is. And if we don't use that, we can sell the excess paper elsewhere.
So we'll get into this a little bit further into the graphs, but each of our power purchase agreements gives us X number of capacity, and then each of our generators give us X number of capacity.
Right.
And our peak for the year, you add 12% to that, and that's what we have to own in capacity. Anything above our peak plus 12% is open to sell. And that's what we're selling. It's not actually the energy, it's
selling
the ability to be able to produce.
So we're selling blue sky until they need it.
Yes.
Well,
right.
Hey,
We're selling the cloud.
Well, it's because somebody else is short on capacity somewhere else. They don't have the resources. They probably don't have the generation. that we
And they
have.
just want to show on.
So make sure we don't pay for it if we don't sell it.
Well, we do whoever our wholesale, but you know, our engines have a certain capacity.
Is the value of the engine.
Yeah. So what if they're rated at
So it's not
3
costing
megawatts?
us anything
Yeah,
to
it's
sell
not.
that. That's just revenue. we're
Somebody,
getting because we have our
somebody
own
needs it.
production.
Right. So it's a paper transaction. That's all it is. Okay. We don't have to do
Get my
anything.
head around it.
Yeah. Yeah, capacity.
We don't do anything with it if we can't find a buyer for it. We just stay long. Somebody has to need it for us to sell it.
Right.
Gardner was buying all of our excess for many years.
I-
They had another project where they don't need it anymore.
Where I'm struggling to draw the line, I guess, this is probably not even relevant, but maybe it is. How is us having excess related to us being able to produce? What is that? How are those two related at all?
Because the generator being able to produce is the asset.
So you had your power purchase agreements plus our generators.
Right.
Equals that. And
Equals
then
the capacity, right?
equals your total capacity, and then you can sell off what you're
But
over.
how can you sell off something you haven't produced with your generator?
Because you have the
Yeah.
capabilities to produce it.
It's all,
But a possible,
That's what I'm
a
wrestling
possible unit of energy doesn't create a
That's
unit
what
of
I'm
energy.
wrestling with.
That's
Someone's
fine.
getting paid for that
It's all on
kilowatt.
paper.
Someone's getting paid for the
It's all
kilowatt
on
that's being
paper.
used.
Right.
No, it's
Who's
not
gonna
actually,
pay?
you're not. You gotta separate the energy from the capacity. That's what's hard to do. Let's do a cell. Here's what I do. Everybody has a cell phone, right?
Yeah.
So you pay a base charge for that.
Yes.
That's a capacity charge. Because on a certain day, it's usually Mother's Day, everybody calls their mother, and they have to have the capacity to accommodate everybody to make a phone call.
The peak.
But it only happens 1 hour. That's your peak for the year. So that's why you're paying that capacity. Now, theoretically, if I could sell my capacity to everybody in the room because I don't use it, that's what you're doing. So it works the same thing for generation. You're selling your capacity to meet that demand for that one peak.
That's all on paper.
Right. It's never.
It's
I mean,
never,
I mean, I could.
it's not real.
It's not. No. It's you know, because they have a theoretical amount that has.
Yeah,
to
no,
be-
that was a good explanation.
Yeah.
I'm trying to
So
think.
that's about the closest I can come.
I'm just trying to relate it to the fact that, to Corey's point of having the generators allows us to have more capacity, which then potentially allows us to offload that when we don't need it. So potentially it's a benefit if they don't run at all, that we might be able to sell the capacity at 225, whatever the paper capacity rate is. So it'd be kind of interesting to know on an annual basis how often it happens and what we've made that way.
Currently, we're making about $1,500 a month.
$1,500 a
Good
month.
month, okay.
Yeah.
And it's preventing us from having to buy from someone else. So it's a way of, I guess, reimbursing the people who invest money in the generation. And it's a way of ensuring that there's enough generation to cover the loads at all times, because
Right.
the people with the generation are getting capacity payments or.
So they're not overselling the capacity. It's got to.
No, it has to equal out at the end of the day, because it all has to balance.
Right, it has to
Yeah, you
balance
can't-
to the all
you can't have-
generator, all the
right.
generation. You can't
Right.
sell more than you have capability.
Correct, you can't sell the same.
It all equals
capacity.
out at the end of the day, including the 12%. Is that correct?
For us, yes, we have to, by the rules, we have to have that. And not, see, the opposite city, yeah, the opposite city for us would be like Eudora, it doesn't have any generation at all.
Yeah.
So they're buying energy, and they're buying capacity from somebody.
I'm sorry I started that, Scott.
No, I mean this is
It's
more
hard.
complex than
Yeah.
Exactly.
you think.
Yeah.
I mean,
Way more.
so you got to ask these questions and still might not get it. But
Maybe need some visuals.
it was a good analogy Glenn had. I like that. It kind of helped understand
About as
between
good as
power and
What we'll probably see later on, or what I see later on in the graphs, is it's the actual visual value of having generation. The other three things that we talk about is not as easy to come up with a dollar value. You know, what's the dollar value of being able to restore your town
yeah.
when you lose your tie? I don't know.
No, I think
Depends on the time, the
Yeah.
temperature.
I think those are all the talking points, though. The actual value, and then what are the intrinsic value,
Right.
and then there's a cost associated with it, and is it worth it? That's kind of what you can look at.
Right.
I don't think we know enough about it to even have that conversation.
Hopefully
You
after
probably do.
tonight.
Yeah, I mean, we're hoping we get
We'll be
closer. We're gonna get closer to that.
Yeah, there.
Okay, so I'm gonna skip a slide, I thought this one ought to go first. Just basic terminology, I'm gonna say kilowatts, I'm gonna say watts, I'm gonna say megawatts, and it's really simple. 1 kilowatt is 1,000 watts, 1 megawatt is 1,000 kilowatts, or 1 million watts. So usually when we're talking, you know, anything over 1,000 kilowatts, we go by megawatts. But you'll probably hear me slipping and going back and forth between the two, but just know what's the mathematical equation for it. Watt hours is the unit of billing. So a watt hour, let's say 60 watt hours would be a 60 watt light bulb running for an hour. That's the energy it takes. That's what a watt hour is. Kilowatt hours, 1,000 of them. Megawatt hours, you know, 1 million of them. Usually when we're talking residential billing, it's kilowatt hours. And when we're talking, you know, like the city wholesale purchases, we're usually talking in megawatt hours. So what do we have available now? So in the power plant 1, which is the downtown unit, we have unit number 4, which is 1500 kW, and we have units 5 and 6 that are 750 kW each, for a total of 3,000 in that plant. Power plant 2 has units 7 and 8, and they are each at 3165 kilowatt each. That gives us a total city generation capacity of 9.33 megawatts.
There's that word again.
They're doing the math on there. So, after seeing the peak, so the peak this year was 9,800 kW or 9.8 megawatts. So we can easily see that we have more peak than we have generation now. So that's why we're having this conversation tonight.
What was it? Peak was in June? June.
When was the peak? So the peak was in September. The last few years it has been, and it may have been more than the last few years, but that's all I've been tracking. It is the first or second week that Baker opens back up for all their students. Usually there's a warm day and that was the first week or two, and that's when we hit our peak. And that's happened the last few years. And that's what happened this year. And it was 90, 98, 80, I believe.
Right. So to go back to the capacity,
Right.
we have to have that 9.8 or whatever that was, or whatever our peak is, plus another 12%.
Right.
That's what you
But
have
it's
to
actually a little more, and I'll show you that.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Or-
So you bring it back for June.
Or we have to buy paper capacity
Yes, you
on the
could,
market
correct,
at 225
Correct.
kilowatt.
or whatever the market is.
Or whatever it is, but right now, that's what it would be. So
Right.
that, it's not like you think you're done, it's you've got to go to a different source to get that capacity.
Correct.
So this slide, the existing generation, that doesn't take into account our solar. Right.
It does not. And we will get into what it provides in some of the spreadsheets too. So since solar is not an around-the-clock purchase and it's not a guaranteed thing, we're getting 30% of what our solar array is. Our solar array is 1 megawatt. The last few years, we've been accredited 30% of that. So basically 300 kW out of that 1 megawatt solar facility, we've been able to claim as capacity. And we'll get a little bit more into that, but, so this particular slide is a peak load history that came off of our records here. And as you can see, it's a pretty uniform line. There's some years that have dipped down. The peak overall was 10.55 megawatts, I believe. And that was in 2011. Since that point, you see the next couple of years it's dropped off a little bit. I attribute that to some of the new technologies that came out, the CFLs and the LED bulbs, the programmable thermostats, the energy efficient appliances and heating and cooling units. But as you can see, it's starting to climb up again with the exception of 2020, which is the second to the last line. And I attribute that low number to Baker and the school districts not being in building some of that year for COVID. So I think that line isn't representative of the normal because of that. So the next slide is taken out of the Loose Data and Brain report that we paid them for, and it basically is showing the very same thing that ours is. The peak was in 2011, 10.531, I guess it was, and then dropping off, but it's showing the same linear raise. So we'll go on a little bit. So what's the future load forecast? So we're going to get into the spreadsheets a little bit. Sheet number 1. Let me open mine up so I can start off with here. So there's some important numbers on that. So the Baldwin SCADA peak is what we show in our SCADA, and that's the numbers that are in our graphs. SPP has a network control point that they determined what our peak was. Now what that accounts for is the losses in the transmission to get from the generation point to our door. So as you can see, SPP's point is a few percentage points higher than what our SCADA actually showed as our peak for the year. And 2008 through 2021 are actual numbers. Those are numbers that happened, and that's what we filled in. From 22 forward is projected numbers. So on this sheet, we are assuming that our peak load will increase 2% every year. If you look down at one of the first firm resources, the GRDA, Grand River Dam Authority, that contract expires in April of 2026. At this point, I don't think we're expecting to renew that because of price. That could change. But if you'll see there in that column, that product gives us 3 megawatts of capacity. That's huge. That's our biggest, capacity besides our own generation. So underneath that is WAPA. It's basically a half a megawatt. Marshall and Buckeye are both wind products, and they are both 1 megawatt each products. But as you'll see, we're not accredited for the 1 megawatt on the wind either, because it's not dispatchable and it's not all the time. So the last few years that we've had those 2 products, they have been coming in right at 22% or 220 kW for every megawatt of wind we have. And then the Baldwin Solar, you'll see on the line underneath that, like I told you before, is credited at 30%. The SPAL product is a very small product, and we only get 100 kW off of it. So the next line under the Nierman is a product we don't have anymore. It went away in 2015, I believe. So the next line under that, we have the accredited generating capacity. So that's what our units are accredited for. And if you look back a little bit, 2016, 2017, we're at 10 megawatts, but we had, in 2018, we took the oldest unit, the Norberg in the back, we took it out of service because the generator failed inspection on it. And we were given a quote to rewind the generator at $250,000. Rob was running the plant at that time, and it was decided that it was not worth rebuild that, so we took it offline permanently. So that's where that drop in 800 kW went. 800 kW. And then in 2019, you'll see that it dropped again, another 800. That was unit 5 when we had the crankcase explosion. That happened in 2018, I believe, and for 2 years we couldn't claim it as capacity because it wasn't running. And at that point, we weren't sure that we were going to spend the money to put it back online. But since then, we found some used parts and we're able to get it at a fraction of what the bid was to get that back online. So you'll see back in 2021, it jumped back on there because we were able to claim it now. So when you add all of the capacity from your firm resources and add it to your own capacity, you get your total credited capacity on the line underneath. The following line underneath that shows you whether you have a surplus or a deficit of capacity. If it's a deficit, then it's in parentheses. Now the line below that, the replacement capacity cost is the if it is a negative number, it is an asset. It can be sold. It's excess capacity, and at today's prices, that's what that excess capacity is worth. You'll see on this particular graph that through 2026 we have excess. But in 2027, after GRDA has dropped off, we go into negatives. And that number at the bottom in the red is today's price on replacing that capacity. And that's, again, like we talked about, just paper capacity. All we're doing is buying their capacity. We're not buying any energy for that money. It's capacity. So, like I said earlier, that this number down at the bottom is the easiest way to give value to our generation. So if we go on to the next sheet, anybody have any questions about that sheet and understanding this?
I'm afraid to ask this. On 2020, you got 8.82.
Uh-huh.
But on 19, you had 9.10, and then you jumped up to 10.2. Why so low in 2020?
That's what I talked about was the COVID year.
That's where it fell down with COVID?
Yep.
Now, how would a COVID affect that?
Because Baldwin, School District and Baker did a lot of
Closed up.
online stuff,
They
and the
closed
kids
up.
were not in the building.
Got it. Thank you.
That's my reasoning for it.
So-
And I could see it in Baker's load and in Baker's bill. So,
Under replacement costs, you showed minus $28,000.
yes,
But that's the paper we're selling, right?
that's a paper that's the extra paper we can sell.
Potential.
Yes, potential. Yes.
So then, but we don't sell that much.
We aren't right now.
Okay. So,
Right now,
And you were
we're
looking
selling.
at 2026, what number were you looking
yeah, I'm looking at 2026 because, I mean, based on the $1,400, that would equal $28,000.
Right. That is the extra capacity at today's price, what we could sell it for if we sold all of our extra capacity. But again, like Rob said, we can't sell it all unless somebody wants
at? We
it.
don't control that. We're
Right.
out there, if they either need it, and I don't even know how they decide who gets to sell the capacity.
When the schoolhouse opens
Somebody
up.
within our power pool first,
So-
they get the first right.
First dibs, yeah.
First dibs, but if there's multiple in the power pool,
Yes, and they divide it up by need.
okay.
And then everybody pays the same price for it.
So there's really no way that we could proactively monetize it.
It opens
has
up,
to be a
it opens up when the schoolhouse opens up, right?
You lost me.
You can sell it when the schoolhouse opens up because you're gonna use more.
Well, that's true. You're talking the power building, I assume.
Right.
Yes. Okay. So what I think will happen, if KMEA does not extend the GRDA project, I think there will be a lot of cities looking for paper capacity. I think it's gonna open up more chances for us to sell that excess capacity if we have it. Because, I know Ottawa has, I watched that video from last night, they said they have 12 megawatts of GRDA. So if they get rid of that, unless they're gonna replace it with something, they're gonna be looking at probably purchasing a large chunk of capacity, unless they have another plan. And then there's several other, cities that have GRDA depots.
Who's responsible for if these capacity elements drop offline, cities and these programs, who's responsible for making sure there's enough capacity in the system?
SPP.
So they have,
Yeah,
so they own making up the difference between capacity that's generated versus the need. I just wanted, and I'm not sure how they would do that. I guess they would transmission it in, or I don't know if they can fire up local plants.
Economically, dispatching. But they're the governing authority, what they say goes, everybody follows their lead.
So I got a couple different scenarios here on what we do, what we could do, what might happen. So the next sheet is assuming everything that sheet one assumed. We're going to continue to go up 2%, but it also adds in year 2024 the 3 megawatt solar field that's in discussion right now. So as you'll see, that changes the Baldwin solar capacity from 0.3 to 1.2 because we've quadrupled the size of our solar field if we add 3 more. So what that does is that adds, the 1.2 megawatts every year versus the 300 kW. So again, looking at the numbers at the bottom, we still don't have enough capacity after GRTA goes away, unless, we have another project that comes up. So following sheet, now these are sheets that Rob left me when he left the power plant. This is something that he tracked all the time. It's part of the job here, is making sure that we have enough capacity. And this is exactly what he left me as his projected, plan. The only thing that's changed on this is the actual price of capacity, and I apologize, I've got the wrong number at the bottom, and the numbers are off. This year's capacity is 225, I've got 250 down here, and that's what I have in the figures. It is 225, so the figures are gonna be 10% off. And I just realized that tonight, I did not have time to change that. But so this is Rob's plan when he left, and it's the same today, nothing changed. So what he had proposed was a 3 megawatt generator coming online in 2023, and then another 5 megawatt generator coming online in 2027. And what that did is it kept us, 4 or 5 megawatts long for most of those years, but it always kept us in the long. And as you'll see by the numbers at the bottom, given today's pricing, that keeps us in a pretty good place as far as capacity. And here's another thing about the cost of the pay for capacity. It's as low as it's ever been. When all the new wind and renewable resources came online, the price of power got cheaper, and so did the price of capacity. So I don't think anybody expects it to stay this low. So I think in the future, if we have coal plants or something that start coming offline, I think that number is going to go up as far as what the value of the capacity is.
So when I put this spreadsheet together, for example, I was using $5 replacement capacity because that's what it cost at the time. And keep in mind too, that this spreadsheet's dependent on our load. As our load fluctuates up or down, it's gonna change your bottom line number here. So that's very top row and very bottom row. Everything else in between is just telling you how you're getting there.
So the next two,
If we get a big, large industrial customer, we get a couple of residential housing additions go in, it's gonna change your top line, it's just gonna change your bottom line.
How many houses do you guys estimate per megawatt?
I have not gone down that far. What I did do is, as I show in the next two, is the EVs. The EVs are going to be, I think, a problem if we don't address them now, because even a small amount of EVs is going to ramp up our peak at a way faster rate than 2%. So I did some calculations on 200 cars. If we had 200 EV cars to our town every year, it would ramp up our peak 400 kW every day. And that's taking into effect that they drive approximately 70 miles, which would be a trip to the city and back. So I think that our rate is going to go, our peak is going to climb quicker than the 2%. So in this schedule, I changed it from 2 to 7%. And another factor is the 2 new subdivisions that we just annexed into the city. And obviously, we don't know if one of them will be our customer yet, because they're currently Evergy's. But between the time we talk about new EVs, and I think we can all agree that that's going to happen to some degree. Every new commercial on TV I see is about an EV car. I really think that they are going to be here and they are going to come in numbers. So, like I said, this sheet number 4, it plays into effect that we added the 3 megawatt solar field and our load jumps from 2% to 7% annually. But we do not do anything as far as any additional in-house generation. As you'll see in 2026, we again go negative on capacity. And by 2030, we're way negative on capacity. And there's a huge price tag at the bottom of that column. So to me, this is not where we want to go. The final spreadsheet is assuming that the same thing as sheet number 4, we go from 2 to 7%. We add the 3 megawatt solar, and we add the 3 megawatt in-house generation in 2023, and we add another approximately 5 megawatt in 2027. Even looking at those numbers, we still go negative before 2030. And that's adding 5 more megawatts of generation, or actually 8 more megawatts of generation. And the other thing that none of these spreadsheets show is if something happens to any of our units at the downtown plant. The two small units down there were built around 1960. They were installed used in 64. The biggest one down there, newest one, was built in 1970. So we're talking 50 plus years on those units down there. Our switchgear is every bit that old. There's going to be a time that something is going to cause either one of those units to go out one by one, or if the switchgear goes out, then those units will be unavailable. Because it won't be worth repairing it for 3 megawatts. I don't know when the time is. I hope it's not during the time I'm here. I don't see any reason why they won't last till 2030. We had the generators inspected this year. They were all in good shape. The engines, we could keep going. We've got the parts. It's the generators and the switchgear that if they fail, they will be what puts the nail in the coffin on the downtown. So
Have you guys considered, I mean, one element I haven't seen here that is missing is people individually putting solar on their homes. And I know we have a cap
We're
on
capped
that.
at 8%.
We have a cap, I don't think we're there yet.
No, we're not there.
But that's a variable that can change.
It can.
That's-
And 8% could, I mean, I don't know what your guys' thoughts are. If you hit 8%, are you going to keep going or what? But then you go back to,
Sounds like we have to.
well, you go back to, is that solar going to be there when you need it though? Because
Yeah, battery technology
Yeah, I was
would be a
gonna say
big part of
batteries.
that conversation,
Another-
but that's certainly an avenue.
So the other question I have, I don't know if I'm on the right sheet or if mine are.
well, I'm sorry, this is not, I've not kept up.
Oh,
either.
okay.
I'm sorry.
So on this spreadsheet, you're showing a projection of 70% increase in peak demand from 2023 to 2030.
It's 7% a year.
But I guess our previous trend hasn't shown any increase near close to that, so.
It's showing 2%.
Right.
And the reason that I went from 2 to 7 is the EV vehicles and the extra customers that I assume that we're going to have in the next 8 years.
But I mean, since 2008, peak demand was 9.15, 2022 is 10.02. That'd be less than 10% increase. And then we're showing, but from 2023 to 2030, we're showing a 70% increase. Just curious if, so you're accounting that to EV vehicles? And growth in housing?
Yes, additional growth, yes.
Okay.
And
That's just a large amount of growth over, and it's all projected, right?
That we don't know.
Yeah, it's all projected.
The point was 10% increase over 15 years versus 7% annual that you baked in, starting in 2023. That's dramatic.
It is, but you better plan for it. Better to do
You
that.
can
Well,
plan for it,
plan.
but I'm also,
Depends on if it depends on what you cost you to plan to actually make that
I was
happen.
gonna say that, I'm trying to balance true need with cost, and I know it's gonna be a balancing act as we go through
Yeah.
this, but that's what, in my head,
Yeah.
I'm trying to balance, the way I see it is we're over projecting for the future, and, the data from before doesn't show that type of a trend. I get EV vehicles, but I also get, to Corey's point, solar on houses, battery storage on houses. I think that does come into play and counteract some of those EV vehicles. So I'm just wrapping it all in my mind and trying to
Sure.
understand all the numbers.
it's very complicated.
Are you taking into consideration growth?
Yeah,
Yeah, he is, definitely.
yeah. I mean,
But all that being said, the next level of thinking there is have versus buy. Because that's the decision, right? Do you want to have it or do you want to buy it? The majority of the cities in Kansas buy it. We have it. Let's do some other cities. So if we've underestimated the need, you still can go buy it. What's the trade-off? I mean, what's the cost relative? If we look at these numbers at the bottom, the excess versus the buy, I think we need to project what the cost of that would be to the city. And we can pick rates that we think it might be, but that's the question is picking the right capacity, but then you really got to figure out if you want to have it or buy it. What are the benefits of that?
How do you figure cost?
Huh?
How do you figure cost?
Of what?
Of what you want to do?
Of which one?
What you gonna buy?
Well, you can see what you can bake in, historical numbers. You can bake in the current numbers. You can take a guess, just like you're guessing on the increased capacity needs. You can say, what if we go back to $5 per kilowatt? What would that cost us? And you project that in versus what would it cost us to add our own generating capacity to support this projected ramp? That's the analysis I think we have to do.
Yeah, the bond payment over the 20 years.
Well, it's the bond payment, it's the operating payment, right? So it's that whole thing, and it's going to get down to the end to what's it worth? Because it will be more, I'm guessing, to have that capacity available to avoid a 2 to 4 hour outage that Lawrence and Eudora had in February. What's the additional dollar per kilowatt hour that we're paying to have that capability? Then it's a value judgment. Some people will say it's worth every penny, and some will say I don't want to pay a cent for it. But I'd love to get down to that to really know what that insurance is costing us. Because when we talk about affordable cities, I think we have to look at those things. It may be more affordable, but not quite as much potential uptime. You might have to live with outages like the majority of other cities in Kansas have to live with. I don't have the answers, but I'd love to think through that and be able to talk to a citizen and say, well, here's why, here's what it is, here's the advantages, here's the additional costs, here's what you get. And then have the citizens kind of weigh in on, is it worth it or not?
Yeah.
Another thing to keep in mind is we're just talking about capacity value.
Yep.
I mean, then we're talking about, you brought up the value of being able to restore your customer, but the February weather event was a perfect example.
Yep.
We saved over $500,000 when all the extra clawbacks are all done. That week, we saved over $500,000 by having generation.
Definitely needs to be part of the analysis.
Yeah, right.
How often does that happen?
I think
Versus-
it'll happen more than
Right.
less.
So that's definitely part, it's good that we've had an event. We have some real
Right.
data. We can actually use that. And it's going to certainly tip it that way. As if we didn't have it, then it would be like, well, we never use this. It
Right.
never is a benefit. So, the upside is we actually have something recent that we can model into, this is the value of having that.
And I assume we'll get into this as further we get, but we're going to talk about used units versus
Yes.
new. Okay.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
I just, real quick, because I'm sitting here listening to conversations, and this is very reminiscent of 2000, at a totally different time in Baldwin and a totally different council that I was sitting in on these meetings on whether or not we were going to build that plant. And I will tell you, what built that plant was that ice storm of 2001. It took that major event to remind people, and this little downtown plant, we did everything we could do to keep everybody on. For the most part, we did, other than what was falling due to ice. We kept the majority of the town on. But that changed the minds of a lot of council members after that event. Sometimes it takes an event like February when we see surrounding towns. If you would poll all of our customers at that point and say, what's this generation worth to you? It's worth a whole lot to us. You didn't have to go for 4 hours or a day or 10 minutes without power because we were able to produce enough that took us off the radar.
Well, we've seen two events. So we had the February event, but we also had the summer event,
We did.
summer of 2018.
But it seems like they just seem to come along in these strategically timed out events where, I don't know why, it's just pure luck or.
You're pulling the plug down there.
Climate change was gonna,
Always a key to that.
that's gonna go into the equation also. Because they say there's gonna be worse storms and stuff coming.
Scott's right, he's absolutely right. He said, I think you have to come down to the question of what's it worth to you to be able to disconnect and
That's my point.
self-supply anytime you want to,
So
for any reason.
back then,
What's that value?
you pull somebody, they're like, it's worth anything, but what if you said, is it worth $500 a year for you every year to have this capability? It's a little different than perspective. Because I don't know what it's costing me, it's easy for me to say whatever it is.
So I think part of the other question of that is looking at what the substation is going to cost, how much the bond payment for that plant is dropping off, and how much would that cost, would it even cost them anymore? right? I mean,
Well, look at it this way, if it falls off, we could actually save it.
we could.
If we don't replace
We
it.
could reduce if we don't
Right.
replace.
So that's my point. I think that's the way we need to look at it. I'd love to say, yeah, it's costing, how many, 2,000 meters roughly? We think it's costing an average of $500 a year per meter to be able to do all these things that we do. And then people are gonna make a value judgment. And it will be different when it goes out and they wish they had it versus when it hasn't gone out for years and they're paying all that money. They're gonna have a different perspective, but at least they know what it is. And I've always wanted to get to that. If we can figure out what that incremental number is, then I think you can have a value discussion with the citizens. And I think they're probably gonna weigh in on, having just been through some, yeah, it's worth that. But I don't know.
All right, we'll keep rolling along. So quickly, benefits of excess capacity. So during an outage, there's what's called end rush. Say we lose our tie and we had 6 megawatts on the town before the tie went off. When we bring that back on, the time we bring it back on, it's not going to take 6 megawatts to start it. It's going to take 7 or 7.5 because everything that was shut off, refrigerators, furnaces, AC units, whatever happens to be on at the time, they're all going to come on because it's been a little short period of time before, since it's been running. So that's what they call inrush. So you need to have 20 to 30% more of whatever you're trying to bring on. You have to have that available in generation. And even splitting it up in feeders, it's going to take that much more to bring a town online. So if the power goes off at an 8 or 9 megawatt day, at that time, we're not getting it back. We're not getting it all back. It's not gonna happen. So we're already over, our peak is already over what we're capable of bringing back online. That's something I know that it's hard to understand.
I you understand it. I mean, if we have 2 substations, you can't, the peak is generated if I remember my physics class where motors turn on, they peak,
Right.
when they start, they over voltage and then settle in. So if they all come on, you gotta satisfy that peak. But if you control how you bring them on, that peak is 30% of a smaller number.
Right.
It doesn't hit our peak if you bring on half the town and get that peak and settle in, and you bring on the other half. So can you control some of that peak?
The longer you stretch out, bringing on the feeders, the more you'll be able to bring. But that last feeder is going to be the one that'll trip it off. Because, if you're up against what your capacity is anyway, and you throw that last one on that should bring you to capacity, it's gonna bring you over.
Sure, that makes sense. If you're that close to peak,
Right.
you're probably in trouble anyway. I got it, thanks.
The other thing is the possibility of one of the 5 units not starting. There's 20 different sensors on the enviros that will shut it down or keep it from starting. And, there's the electronics on those units are approaching 20 years old. So there is a chance, there are times that we try to start some, we have issues with them. Never happened before until that particular day, and then you'll have to fight through that problem. So can we bring them all on quickly on? If it's winter time, we have all of our cooling towers drained at the downtown plant because they don't run antifreeze in them. So 2 of the units we could bring on immediately. The third one, the big unit down there, it would take a while, probably an hour to get water in it and get it burped and get it started.
These units that you're talking about, they run on diesel.
They're all dual fuel. They start on diesel, and if you want to, you can switch them to natural gas.
Is there you got any figures on the cost of what the operation would be?
Yeah, depends on the price of fuel, but yeah, I can give you those numbers.
Because
Cheaper than natural gas was costing last week.
Yes.
That was that was the big win, right?
Yeah.
it was, I'm sorry.
Cheaper than the natural gas, what natural gas was costing last February. We ran
During the
off all
February
diesel.
weather event, we ran on diesel straight through.
Well, diesel's gonna continue to climb because the government's gonna make it that way.
But it was still way cheaper than gas.
I
If
think-
we couldn't have got gas a gallon.
I think in the way Scott's figuring it, that's something that probably should be projected also when you start figuring on doing that.
They have the cost per kilowatt it costs us to run our generators.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think,
Now,
Yeah, we know what it costs.
now,
Yeah,
yeah,
because that's how we submit it to the
On
market,
both fuels or just as lowest cost fuel?
both.
I'd be
So
interested to
that's what
see.
we're looking for.
I'd be interested to see a graph or chart showing the value that we get from selling our capacity versus annual bond payment of having that there. You know what I'm saying? How much would it pay for itself?
That's doable, I think.
Be important
Come up with
information
something
to
like
know.
that. Now, it's given,
but it's only 1,400 a month.
Yeah, that's a small number.
Right now,
Right.
you had 5 megawatts.
With no guarantee that you're selling a nickel of it.
Does that happen often where you don't sell any of it?
Yeah.
they've sold some in the 3 years I've been in there.
So what we'd like to see is what we've actually sold
There you go. In previous years.
previous years.
I think maybe important would be what it would cost us if we didn't, would be
The
a,
second part of that, the
Right.
first part is, it's a potential benefit, but it's never realized it really isn't a benefit.
it might not be a benefit, right?
Right. And then the second
It's not
part is if you
guaranteed.
don't have it, so that's back to the have versus buy. Would it cost us to buy it?
Right.
Here's what it costs us to have it.
I'd like to see the whole picture, the whole scenario.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's like-
It's at the bottom line of that spreadsheet, that's your buy number. If we don't have it.
If it's a positive number, that's what it would cost at today's line to buy it,
That's too
that
bad.
amount. Yeah, at 250, not 240.
Sometime between now and 2030, that's gonna go up. It's not gonna stay at 250. You start retiring coal plants, that number's gonna go up.
So back on your spreadsheets though, weren't the bottom numbers really the value at 225? I mean, what are those negative numbers there?
The negatives are the amount you could sell.
That's my point. So
Good versus
Where do you see
actual.
that?
that's the line we're missing. So on these, that number down the bottom's got negative numbers,
Mm-hmm.
the red.
Oh, okay.
That's the potential excess capacity we could sell. What you're asking for is what have we sold?
The
That's
actual
another
number,
one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And when it goes positive, that's what we would have to buy under this scenario.
Right. But that positive number is that number that you pay.
You would have to pay at today's prices, yes.
Yeah,
If you needed to buy that
two
capacity.
point five.
Right.
At current, yeah. So
Right.
then you project what it would be if it's doubles.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That'd be interesting to see.
More benefits to excess capacity is, the age of our downtown units, age of the electronics. Sometimes we're working on one of the units. Obviously, there's time that we gotta have downtime. That 2018 incident that Casey talked about, we had unit 4 down. We couldn't use it because it was at maintenance at the time. So that's why we got in such a bind that day.
We had to shut down the schools.
We were asking everybody to conserve, and we got right up there. I mean, it was to the point, we were gonna have to dump something.
That's oil changing time, is that what you're saying?
It could be anything, any kind of maintenance to the units. We try to schedule our maintenance at a time that we don't expect to use them, but you don't ever know when something's going to go wrong and you'll have to have a unit offline, unavailable.
Well,
It's a piece of equipment, and like I said, most of them are 3 of the 5 are 50 years old or more.
that's the name of the game.
And one of the things is if you're running, if we're islanded, if our tie is empty, and we're running to support our town, one of them can trip offline too. So there's all these options that could go on. So I don't want to dwell on that too much, but.
No, you want to scare us.
A quick get into solar generation. We currently have the 1 megawatt field, you guys know. Considering putting in another 3 megawatts. There's some pros to solar. Right now, at least for the first 7 years of the contract we have on the 1 megawatt field, it is a fixed rate PPA for 30 years if that's what we decide to do. It's 25 or 30. 25 or 30, I don't remember which it
It's
is.
either 25 or 30.
So if
It's a
we-
long time either way.
If we don't want to buy it, we're going to pay 57 cents kilowatt hour, 5.17 cents kilowatt hour from now until the end of the contract. After year 7, we can also purchase the field, and then, you know, the price of the finished product will depend on what we have to put in it as far as maintenance. But, so the new, I haven't seen the plans of the new, I don't know pricing, I don't know whether, but anyway, so one of the pros of the solar is it's a fixed rate if that's the way you choose to do it. No additional fuel costs, you're able to claim the green energy if we retire the RECs. RECs are renewable energy credits. To this point, we've retired everything, but they can be sold and they do have a value. Value changes pretty much monthly the way it appears. Possible future battery storage. I've been in touch with the power plant operator in Minneapolis, Kansas. They installed a 1 megawatt, it's advertised as a 5.1 megawatt battery storage facility. They're only, to this point, getting about 4 megawatts out of it. But I've talked to him. We're gonna go visit their plant when it warms up a little bit. I had some questions for him as far as what is the size, how can it be used? So the way that their particular solar storage works is it can only get put out 1 megawatt an hour, 1 megawatt hour at a time. So if we were wanting to use a product like that in outages, it's not gonna work. Because it will only, even though it's 5.1 megawatt hours, it'll only put out 1 megawatt hour at a time, 5 hours. So that would not run, you know, much of our town. So,
Wait, can you compare it? Compare it with what
Yes.
we're generating and that storage?
yes,
What'd you say?
Can you pair the battery storage with what we're generating from the diesel engines?
yes,
Yeah, I was gonna ask that question. And you can do that.
yes.
So in a cloudy, snowy, rainy day, you can still put juice in the batteries.
Yep, as long as they're charged. No, I'm saying, you're saying put in or remove from?
Put in, is there a time that you can put juice in those batteries?
Most of the time
Other than the panels?
what they try to do is charge them either by solar or they charge them from the times that the price is the cheapest. So what they're using, that the market price is the cheapest,
Okay.
which is normally midnight till 6 or 8 a.m.
Right.
Normally when the price of power is the cheapest. So what they're doing out there now is they're charging it during that time and then they're releasing the power during the highest price time of the day.
It's a silo.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a and that's how they're using it. They're not using it for, like I said earlier, they're not using it for storm recovery or anything like that. It's not designed for that.
They do charge the batteries electrically.
So what is the cost of battery storage?
I don't know. His comment was that it's not feasible yet.
What's the cost of the battery?
Well, that's, basically what I'm saying.
They're not.
It's
His saying was that they're not paying for themselves yet. So I don't think we're there yet. I mean, I hope we get there, and I think we'll get there, but I don't know the time frame for that. There's 2 more projects that I'm aware of. One is at Wichita State, and one is at Pitt State. And they're Evergy products, and they said that they will take us, when they get them up and running, that they'll take us to tour those facilities too. So it's something that I'm keeping on the radar, and you know, if it's something that we can do, I'm all for it. But right now, it's not a, you know, alternative for generation either. There's some cons to the solar. One of them is the picture I show there. Obviously, that's our solar field, and it's not gonna be doing much on a day like that, so. It's not dispatchable, we can't control when or how much. It takes a huge footprint of land to add to it. Even as a power purchase agreement, we have man hours involved in it. When, the inverters are being replaced and such, we're making all that happen. We're not the ones doing it, but we're, you know, facilitating with the contractors that do it. We receive the inverters in, you know, we get them to them. So there's some man hours there, that minimal man hours, even though that it's not our project yet. If we do purchase it, then obviously it's gonna turn into to more man hours for us.
What's the life expectancy on a panel?
The panels have a warranty of 25 years. Inverters at 15 years, racking has 30. So any of those that fail during that time frame, if the manufacturer is still in business, then they're warranted.
Are there wires, available for mice to chew on and crap like that coming out of those things?
They're in conduit.
They're in conduit.
The short answer would be no. They're there, but
I like the short answer.
now if they get in the cabinets or somehow are able to get into it, then I guess that
Not
could.
squirrels. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, to bring that up.
I did.
What was it?
Squirrels. The other thing
We
is,
got squirt, they
We got squirrels.
they take care of it out here. We don't
They
need
do,
it.
that's right, they get it on the other end, so.
panel degradation is another one. The industry admits, a 0.5 to 1% degradation per year on panels. So after 30 years, you're looking at 15 to 30%,
Loss.
loss in what it was intended to be when it was new. So again, why is solar not a replacement for the in-house generation? Same things I just talked about, it's not dispatchable, dependent on the time of day, cloud and snow cover, but the biggest issue, and that's why I underline it, is the rapid spikes and dips in the output. So this was an actual slide that's from our solar plant. As you can see at the bottom, it was January 27th. This is a average partly cloudy day. So if you look at the numbers, you can see that they're, and this is on 1 minute intervals. I couldn't get it any closer than that. It's not available. But at 1 minute intervals, it's taking those big spikes. And in real time, it's actually 1 or 2 seconds. So the second that a cloud rolls, obviously it's going to start at one end of the field and move on. And depending on how fast that cloud's moving is how fast it either ramps down or peaks up. So we'll keep moving. I know you guys probably want to get out
So
of here.
as batteries come into play though, I mean, this is a problem if you're basically driving the grid directly.
Yes.
Can't do it, obviously.
Very difficult.
But as batteries come into play, that obviously dampens, this all gets hidden behind the battery, and the battery's gonna be outputting a steady voltage.
If the batteries are able to swing with the solar, because the battery's going to have to make up the distance as the
Right.
solar
After a certain point,
dips.
yeah,
It's got to peak.
I would think
within a
it would
couple
dampen
seconds.
that out. It would not be, I would think that's one of the benefits of having batteries in place,
Right.
is to offset this.
And again, I think it's going to matter the battery size, whether
Yeah.
it can take as big a jump as we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's going to struggle just like our generation will, and I'll try to show you a little bit of that. So the first next slide here is islanding versus parallel. Islanding is what we call if we lost our tie and we're covering our town. So this is a parallel generation. We're running our generators, the solar is running, and the tie is taking up the top half. Excuse me. So you see the blue is 2 megawatts. The solar is going up and down between, 300 kW and maybe 900 kW, and then the tie, the brown up above it, is absorbing it. So it doesn't matter what our generation do, it's just sitting there because we told it to sit there. But when we talk about the next slide is islanding, is that tie is not there. So the solar's still there, and then our generation has to make up the difference. So in this slide here, this is a 1 megawatt field. And as you can see, again, it's dipping from 300 to 800 or 900 kW. And your generator's gotta catch up with what it lost or gained. And it's gotta do it quickly. In this scenario, I think if we had 2 units on, it would probably work. We haven't tried it. I think we could probably do it. I think the engine would take this. But let's go to the next slide, and if we add 3 more megawatts of solar, it changes the picture drastically. So it changes the peaks from 3.5, 3.8 megawatts down to less than 1 megawatt. There's no way that the units are going to do that. We would have to turn off the solar, at least the 3 megawatt solar during this scenario. This is the biggest reason why we cannot put solar to replace our in-house generation. it's not going, it can't be done for a islanding situation. The generator will trip offline. Easy, I'm trying to think about how to describe this. So this is, you got a pickup, you got a trailer behind it, you're pulling up a hill, you're trying to maintain 60 mile an hour. You've got it to the floor, that would be 100% load on this generator. All of a sudden you lose your load. Let's say you put it in neutral. You know what's gonna happen when your foot's on the floor, you put it in neutral going up a hill. And then you put it back in drive. So basically it's going to be shocking the motor both ways. These units won't do it, they'll trip offline immediately. That's why solar will not replace the generation during an outage. Cannot work. The 1 megawatt, we maybe can do, I'll tell you if we ever try it.
These generators aren't rated to a certain fluctuation over time. I mean, I would think there's a number that says they will stay online if it fluctuates 1 megawatt over a 10-second period. But if you go higher or shorter, it'll trip. I mean, aren't they rated to theoretically know what that is? Or not?
The newer ones that we're going to be talking about a little bit later are better at doing that than the ones that we have now.
Yeah.
Our 2-strokes now don't like to change load.
Especially if they're on gas.
Yeah.
If they're on diesel, they're much more forgiving. But even at that, they're not, what he's talking about, doing, I mean, they just won't, they don't follow that kind of swing. They're kind of like base load units. They like to do what we do with the most, is run parallel KCP and L-shaped peak. That's why we bought those units and emergency backup. That's what they do best. The cat units suggest when I talk about it, they've got a lot wider range. They can sustain those swings. I've seen them do it. You know, the little Black Start generator we put up our water pumping station. They came out and field tested that, load tested that. I watched them go from 0 load to 100%, and I watched that unit pick it up, and they dumped every bit of it off, 100% back to 0, and did it 3 times. I never believed it. I've never been around a unit like that can do that.
That's a generator at home.
Yes.
So
It ought to be able to do that.
even what he's saying that it could do it, possibly these could do it, you wouldn't want to do it for hours on end. I mean, it's going to tear up the units to do it. So let's get into what generation options are. So again, we talk about registered and emergency only. Registered units, they can be submitted to the SPP market. If we plan on buying a new unit and submitting and putting it in the SPP market, having a registered unit, it must be Tier 4 compliant. So that means we have to run SCRs, which is running a urea for the exhaust. You know, it's like the DEF on these newer pickups. Same thing. You have to add a product to it to clean up the emissions on it. And to be a registered unit, brand new, it has to have that. That's called Tier 4 compliance. It makes it very expensive to operate, makes it very expensive to buy, and they have problems just like the new diesel pickups have problems with when they started all this. Registered units and emergency units, I didn't put down emergency units. They can be dual fuel or diesel only. Dual fuel is more expensive to buy the unit, but again, it opens up 2 possibilities for fuel. The February weather event was a good example of that. If we had natural gas units, we wouldn't have used them. Gardner was an example of that. They had their units set up for natural gas, and they did not run because they could not change it over quickly to diesel. Having two sources is a good thing, but it is more expensive. The other option we can go is emergency only units. They cannot be put into the marketplace as a registered unit, except for, there are some caveats. One of them being, if you buy a used unit, I believe 2014 to 2018, and you add a catalyst to it, then it will meet the emission requirements, and it can be used as a registered unit. But to buy a new one of those, if you buy a new non-tier 4 unit, then it cannot be in the marketplace. It cannot be a registered unit. the non-registered units, of course, are cheaper. The tier 2 are cheaper to buy, operate, maintain than tier 4. So we're going to quickly go back to what Luke's came up with. We paid them to do this, so one of their considerations was their existing condition is that they say plant 1 will retire, and that's legit. At some point it will. I don't know when that is, but that's when it does that, we're definitely going to be in the negatives as far as capacity and being able to pick up the town during an outage. So what did they come up with? They had option A. Option A is a 9.3 megawatt Worksession at the cost of $13.5 million in 2021 dollars. That would be awesome. But I think probably everyone here in the room knows that that's not in the budget and never will be. They have option B is today, to do a 3 megawatt unit. Now they're looking at like a diesel or a MTU or a Cummins. It would be a 1800 RPM diesel, and it would be more like what we're talking about is that the water pumping station and the black start at the power plant 2, except a much larger version. They have the pricing at a tier 4, 3 megawatt at 2.1 million. So what's our recommendation? Our recommendation,
Before you move on, just going back to the existing conditions. So they're showing projected growth, and I know I'm dwelling on this, based on the figures you showed, to 12,000 kilowatts. Weren't we showing like 15,000 projected over the next 10 years?
yes, but they were going more on the trend of what we've done in the past. My last 2 sheets went on more of what I think how the load's going to grow.
Okay. So it's probably somewhere
In between is probably a fair assessment of what's actually going to happen. So I think that's fair. So our recommendation is this is regardless of whether we move forward with additional solar or not, because it really, one doesn't make the other one not a viable product. So we stick with Rob's plan. 2023, we install a 3 megawatt unit, and then 2027 we install another 3 to 5 megawatt unit. And like I said in the slide here, and that 2027 timeframe could maybe move based on what the downtown plant's doing, what our city peak load is actually doing by 2027, what we actually did to replace the GRDA contract. That's going to play into this because that's 3 megawatts of capacity. But for the time being, we look at one new unit now, and then the possibility of another one in 3 to 4 years. So what's available? The next one is from Foley Cat. These are all new units. The tier 2 standbys are the emergency only units that I talked about. That price is delivered but not installed. And it kind of depends on what we buy or how we install it on the cost to install. If we were just to throw this in the 3rd bay down there, the price to install is not going to be that much. They come with breakers on their units. We would not even have to add another breaker. We could probably cut a hole in the wall for the radiator and just put it up next to the wall, and the install would be considerably less than $500,000 I had down at the bottom. Now, we're talking about adding more than 1 unit. We're going to run out of room, so we're going to have a building price. If we're talking about a unit that doesn't come with a breaker, we're going to have a new breaker, all the switch gear, hook it to the SCADA. It's going to be a cost. So I rounded way up and put a $500,000 unit install price on any of those 5 options there.
So the standby units are the ones we can't sell the excess power from,
Correct.
And prime.
We can't enter into the market, yes.
Yeah. So I guess my question would be, would we even make up that cost difference between the standby and the prime? Because I care about our citizens,
Sure.
I don't care about selling it unless there's a proven model that we're going to make up that difference in that.
So in today's market, the answer is, in today's market, I don't see us being dispatched over and above the 6 megawatts that we already have in the marketplace. Because our 2 units down there are already in the market, so they can be dispatched. My personal thought on this is the next one moving forward, we do an emergency only, or you'll see in a later slide that there's a used unit out there, a 2014 unit that I believe that we can just add a catalyst to, and it will be able to be a registered unit.
That was my question on the 4,000 kilowatt unit, the tier 2. Did you add a catalyst to that?
No,
No.
it's a brand new unit.
Okay.
If it was used, yes, because back in 2014, it met the standards.
Okay. Got it.
When you're talking $600,000 more for less kilowatt, I mean, or $475,000 more for that tier 4 unit for less kilowatts than the standby tier 2, right?
Yep.
Huh? Yeah, we can, as of now, we can still use capacity.
Still some capacity on this, even that standby.
Yeah. As of now, even emergency units are available for capacity.
They're non-dispatchable, you wouldn't be able to put them on the market, but you could sell them.
You have the manpower,
Wasn't that what we were
Sorry?
trying to resolve
you have
here?
the manpower and the knowledge available to install these?
Not ourselves.
No, no. I mean, we can assist.
We would attempt that, I mean, that was all part of the package deal as an installation and run in and test fully cap.
If you do anything next week, we'll go hook one up.
Will the warranty survive on this?
Right?
There are some things that we can do in-house to control costs, but not totally, no.
You can build a pad that sets on and all that
Sure.
stuff.
Well, we might need Rob's guys.
Well, that's what we did up north there, I mean, we built that
Yeah, you built that pad?
and, hired the cranes at it, and then they came in and tuned it and
No.
tested it.
With that unit's up north, is that compatible with what you're talking about?
In a much smaller frame, it's much
That's
smaller
a
unit.
smaller unit.
Yeah, it's a 300 kW, when we're talking 4,000 kW.
Yeah.
So it's a much smaller unit, yeah.
So just to repeat, just that, I don't know if everyone heard it, the standby units you can use to sell capacity, just not
You get
put to
capacity
market.
sets for those,
Yes.
Okay.
just like we do the downtown.
So, actually, Logan, our newest employee, came upon 2 used Fairbanks a couple weeks ago, so started inquiring about them. They're in Ventura, California. They have less than 800 hours each on them. They were in an AT&T facility in Los Angeles. They removed them and they've been sitting in a crane storage facility for several years now. I've been trying to get an idea of what kind of shape they're in. My guess, my best guess now is we would probably have to overhaul them. That's why the final estimate at the bottom, the unit cost is $39,000 each. But you see at the bottom of the final install estimate is $1 to $1.5 million, and that's to get them here, get them set. If we buy 2 units, we're going to have to add to the building, and then more than likely we would probably have to overhaul the units. So
They're 3 megawatts apiece.
they're 3 megawatts each. So that'd be 6 megawatts
Yeah.
right there.
We'll build a metal building and throw one of them in there for later use.
Well, we could put
Building
one.
was designed to add on to. Mine
Yeah.
too was-
Yeah, I know we can put one in there, but if we bought 2, can we throw one in storage?
Yes.
We might need one for parts.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know, you don't know what kind of shape they're in, how long they've set out.
Buy one and steal off the other ones.
That's almost like scrap price.
It is good.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, I mean,
Yeah, that's what,
so far as
that's cheap and that bothers me.
Well, I asked them this
They're
question.
paper generators.
Yeah, they'll generate some capacity.
Jerry, you said you can fix anything.
I asked them this question, I said, have they had water in them from the time they were removed? And I did not get an answer, so to me, that answer is no, they do not. And if they have not had water in them, then they will need all the liners replaced. And the liner cost from Fairbanks is over $13,000 each, and there's 12 of them in each of the units. So there's a significant cost in liners alone. All the other parts, probably not gonna be a big deal. The generators themselves may need some cleaning and stuff like that, but, the biggest expense would be getting them here, because they'll have to come on rail.
What year are they? I don't see a year.
They're 1994, but
19.
they have less than 800 hours on each of them. I believe this is the last one.
In the church.
Yeah, church on Sunday, where the old lady took them, right?
Don from Foley approached me about this one last week. I asked them what they had in the way of used one, and this one really piqued my interest. I wish it was a little bigger, but it's 2.5 megawatt. They sold it new in 2014. This is a picture of it being installed. That's the actual unit. It has less than 50 hours on it. The business that was installed it went out of business. So it has not been running in a couple of years, but it has been maintained with water and everything in it. So I don't think there'd be any issues as to what kind of shape it's in. The $690,000 includes delivery. And again, these numbers at the bottom, I went high thinking that we may have to add a building. If we put that in the existing hole, those numbers are gonna come way down.
What's way down?
Well, again, that one has its own breaker, so we wouldn't have to have a breaker. I would think that, well, actually the 1 million probably isn't too far off. By the time you pay $690 and then, there'll be concrete work and all kinds of stuff, hook into the SCADA. If we do add the catalyst, which I believe would make this available to be a registered unit, because it's a 2014 unit. And I believe if all we did was add a catalyst to it, then that it can be considered a registered unit. We can put it in the marketplace.
Where is it right now?
It's in Kansas. I can't tell you what town. It's not that far away. So that's pretty much, I know you guys probably all
Learned a lot.
Any other questions that I can answer at this time?
What did we just go through?
You summarize everything.
There's a test tomorrow.
I got it.
Any of you have questions
I got it,
after
baby,
the
I
fact?
got it.
You got it memorized.
So I finish off, I guess what I'm asking for is some sort of guidance as to how you feel about this. Because if we're thinking that we are on track of maybe pursuing a used unit, the used units are gonna go fast. It's not something that, let's see if we can do this a year from now. They're not gonna be here at that time. So if it's something that you guys are interested in, if we can get the price where we need it, get the unit where we want it, I guess what I'm asking for is could we move quickly if that's what you guys are thinking?
So I think what we're gonna have to do is bring both plans together. Now that we've had a work session on each one, I think we probably need a work session with you guys together to look at, because I know there's some questions from the council on how much is it gonna cost for the substation to bring the lines to each location. So we need that, we still want that answered. And then obviously look at the big picture on the numbers on what bonds are going off, how much is this gonna cost to come, I mean, we still need that discussion. So I would recommend next month we have a combined work session with bringing both of them in to get some of those questions answered. Because I still have a lot of questions out there, and I've been to a lot of the utility committee meetings.
I don't know if I got any questions, but I could probably make some up, but, I'm interested in this 2014. I'd hate to see that thing get gone because we drug our feet.
Well, either way, we can't make a decision tonight.
I mean-
we can't vote at a work session. So, but
That'll be gone, there'll be something else. I mean,
I think
That's the way it
we
works.
had one last year too that we could have
Sometimes.
bought, right? I mean,
There was two that were supposedly come available and they never did.
they never came.
No, they decided to keep them. The February weather event changed the demand for used units. A lot of the cities gobbled up some used units. So, and one thing I wanted to bring up is when we first started this project, I can't remember who all was there, but Glenn was involved and Ben was involved, and we asked how this would fit in with the bond coming off from the power plant. And he basically told us that no, we wouldn't come to where we could drop the amount that we're paying on the bond, but he thought that we could fit in both projects, and that the new bond would be coming on about the same time as the old one went off, and it would be a seamless transition where there would be no requirement for raising rates. So,
Yeah, I think we have a lot of options, and again, that's why I'd like to have that other.
Glenn, I
work
want to
session.
hear from you. What do you think?
For, just the generation side,
Yeah,
I think looking at the used 2014 2.5, I think we should look at that pretty hard. It's relatively new, but it's close by and easy to install. That's gonna probably be your most cost-effective way of doing it.
I'd like you guys to explore the ones in Ventura a little bit more. $39,000 a piece.
You could. I have trouble with the reliability. They're that old and then sitting there for that long. So I don't know. That's pretty cheap.
California.
I just want to
straight
know
off.
a little bit more about them.
Yeah.
I have a guy who is working on, in a railroad museum, 3 hours away from there. We were able to get him some parts that we don't use anymore. We sold him some parts. He has volunteered to drive over to that lot and to go over them if we want him to. So
anyways, what I was getting at though is we have reserves sitting in the electric fund. That if we decided we wanted to move quick on this used unit, we could. And then as we go through the project to get this tied up, then wrap that back into the bond to help replenish our reserves. So we have some flexibility.
We also have to weigh the decision when are we eligible to purchase the solar field?
year 8, and it was installed in 2019.
So that's coming up too.
We got 5 years.
That's
Right.
going to be something that we're going to talk about.
But I think as that technology keeps going down at the rate it is, if it does keep going down, I don't know that it'd be advantageous to purchase it.
I don't know. Didn't talk to her.
After we have 7 years under our belt, maybe we can come up with,
Who do you know that installs these things?
the generators. Foley would be involved in it, of course.
Foley at Kansas or Topeka?
Well, they have all around. Kansas City, Topeka, Wichita.
Either one.
If it was a CAT unit, it would probably be them. Then obviously we'd probably have to get a contractor involved to do whatever building issues need to be changed.
And you think this has got water in it?
Oh, I know it is, yeah.
Well, I haven't got past the ad versus buy paper capacity question. I haven't.
You haven't got
You're
what?
still stuck on page 2.
No, I haven't got past it. Is it better to rush in to add some capacity now, or do you wait and look at the buy-in the capacity as a stopgap and figure out where you really need to be? So I probably need to have some more information about what that looks like. If we, if you look at this plan, rather than add 3 megawatts in 2023, what if we didn't add anything? Just say, okay, we're gonna wait till 2027. What would that look like? And what would that look like based on the capacity needs that you projected versus what it would cost us to buy paper capacity to fill the gaps? And then I think we go, okay, there's what it would look like. Here's the difference in adding this capacity right now versus waiting to see what really manifests itself around the battery technology, around the EV thing. That all these are unknowns. So the longer we can wait, because we're heading down a path that you're gonna it's a sunk cost, you can't get out of it, right? So we're just gonna generate more and more and more, and that might not be the best path to go. We may wanna phase out a little bit and maybe do emergency only and offset that with, with just buying paper capacity like everybody else does. Gerda comes on, we don't even know what happens there. There's so many unknowns. It's just,
You just lose the benefit of having.
I'm 81 years old. I'm gonna die before this is all over with.
well, so I think this is not all about you. So I'm just trying, these decisions are long-term decisions. When you're talking about adding generation capacity, that's a 30-year commitment for the cost ongoing every year. So these are not trivial, easy, and to rush into it because there's a unit available, I just want to know, it looks like that's the right thing to do because the alternative is just too costly to not do that. I'm not there yet. I don't have the information.
Well, I think the other caveat to yours is to weigh that against the benefit of having the power during an event. Rare, but
Sure. I'd love to get to that quickly too, so then I can get past that part, and then it's more of just the economics of adding it now versus waiting to add it maybe in a couple of years.
So that 3 megawatt unit is worth 81,000 capacity a year. So if we had to buy that 3 megawatt, it's 81,000 a year. So we can pay off $1 million, relatively quickly, and then we still have the asset. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it versus now if we don't need the capacity, it's a different story.
That's my point, is we're projecting
Right.
and we're making a decision, and the more data you have, go out a couple of years, you'll see if your EV is coming true, you'll know if we're actually gonna add rooftops like we think we will, then it'll be, yeah, it makes sense, but if we do this and we don't, then it will be possibly the wrong decision today. I mean, I'm happy to sit down with you guys and just help me get to that compare.
Well, the other part, Scott, I think is helping me get there. And this is just me.
Well, I'm telling you, you're already there. I'm not there.
No, not 100%. I mean, it's taken me a while. It's taken me a lot of
Yeah.
committee meetings to come to that, but it's also the cost of money right now, where that's going to go. We're already, it sounds like we're going in the direction of adding another substation, which is the more expense. How much does that bond payment reflect if we add, this into that bond payment and all that? So I agree. I think we're agreeing that I want to see the financial side of it still.
Yeah.
We got 2 units sitting right downtown there that could blow up tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And if we had one on hand, somewhere to be able to set and start one, to pick up whatever you could in a short amount of time as you could.
Yeah.
If you're gonna play all these ifs,
Right.
well, let's really get into the ifs. You're gonna have the roofs coming in 10 years. You got 2 units sitting down there, one of them's 1960.
My feeling is that any big decision is gonna have a projection to it.
Right.
And you wait 2 years, then there's gonna be another projection
Right.
for the next 2 years.
True.
And so you're just kicking the can down the road, and you're basically,
What you can look back on and say, were the last 2 years favorable or not? And if they were, it's like, oh, maybe we can wait 2 more years. If it wasn't favorable, it's like, yeah, we should have made this decision. Let's make it now. I don't have that data to say the last.
Look back 2 years and see what it is today.
Right. That's what I'm trying to do, is get to that. When we look at our usage below our max capacity, it doesn't show, there's reasons potentially for that. So the last 2 years data doesn't show we need to go add 3 megawatts tomorrow. Just looking at the data.
Okay.
So,
I get where you're coming from, because you're saying that based over the 2008 to 2021, we didn't see that big of an increase in our usage. Is that what you're?
that's part of it, yeah. And we've actually seen it drop. I think there's reasons for that. I'd like to see if it comes back in September when this thing, boom, it's back there. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It wasn't because, people are generating their own solar, whatever, or they're just more energy conscious. And we go, yeah, that was the blip. But if we go add 3 megawatts and it flattens out and stays below our current, did we really need it?
Eventually we will.
Eventually we may.
Eventually we will.
And, yeah. And you could, again, is it more costly just to buy it, like most of the other cities do, or generate yourself?
I think it's cheaper to generate yourself.
I
With the
disagree.
February event, we would have had to pay out.
Yeah, it depends on the event. On an annual basis, it's not cheaper for us to generate. Based on the kilowatt cost that we're buying it at and we're selling it.
I guess,
Yeah,
It's the insurance policy,
Yeah.
and it's fine. We all have insurance. I'm not against it. I just want to know what the insurance is costing.
This is, we understand, staff understands, this is one of many cogs in this wheel. And unfortunately, you're the council members set here, that we've got a lot of major projects coming due all at once. We've got the Bower building, we're gonna need a new swimming pool, the streets are falling into disrepair. New substation, added generation, millions and millions of dollars worth of decisions gonna have to be made. And so, we're aware of that, and we're trying to be, we prepare for these things. I always try to think, if I was a council member, what would I want to know? What questions would I want to answer? I think what we're talking about here tonight is all good stuff, and it's certainly stuff we need to talk about, but we also realize that there are other decisions that you all are gonna have to make very, very quickly, you know.
I think one of the things that I think about is I like the idea that we're independent.
Why?
I just don't like depending on something else. You know, so if we got our own stuff and they have a tornado that goes through wherever and tears down all electric lines someplace else, we're independent, we can do our own thing.
Goes back to that insurance policy.
It does.
Do what?
It goes back to that insurance policy.
Insurance policy.
That's kind of what I took that as, we want to control our own fate, but it's not at all costs. In my mind.
He brought up something that I didn't even talk about tonight. I know we've talked about this in the past, was we're at the end of a low voltage line. We're in a bad spot for transmission. Had we been able to go north and tie it to that 345, our tie would have been much more robust. And this would have probably been a different story today. Because generation would have been less of a restoration. If it, you know, we'd be talking about capacity and that kind of stuff to see whether it made dollars and cents. But the fact that where we're at in the transmission line puts us in a bad place, and we're prone to outages because of it. That's another thing that I didn't even bring up today, but when he mentioned that, it kind of came to my mind.
But also, didn't I hear from the engineers in one of the utility committee meetings that if we had to, this is just an if, that our generators can actually produce 50% more.
10%. But that's on not a 50 or 60-year-old unit.
So 10% more than what they're rated at. So our 10 megawatts is 11. Could be 11 if we.
Well, we have 9 megawatts, and it could be the 3 units downtown. We don't even claim them at 100% because one will not run 100%. It will overheat, and the other 2, there's no reason to run 50 and 60-year-old electronic equipment at 100%. So we actually have them derated to about 80% of nameplate capacity.
Sorry, so that's a substation that can run at 50, that can handle 50% more.
For a short period of time, yes.
Okay, I got the 2 megawatts.
Yes.
We have a 160 or 161 Gardner,
Maybe.
Gardner never comes out. I mean, very seldom, they have to be a dramatic amount of Gardner release power. They still have a power plant, they still maintain it. But that's what Jeff was talking about. We had a high voltage tie that we could tie in. That would dramatically change this discussion, the need to have.
No, I mean, I can tell you from where when I started my time as mayor to where I am now is a much different place because I wasn't as favorable to our power plant at the beginning as I am now experiencing those 2 events and what we dealt with. So that's how more of my views have changed to to that. So, but I'm trying to look at it from all sides.
I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm gonna say it anyway, but you know, that's the way it goes. If we were any place else besides here in a private meeting, I would probably make a motion to see where it's gonna fall.
Well, we'll plan on another work session. The next work session in March, does that work? To bring both plans together for everybody?
What was it now?
The work
Make sure
session
I
in
can
March.
fish it somewhere.
The work session in March.
Oh, March? What year, what day is that on?
It's second Tuesday in March.
They've been-
So is there anything in particular you guys are wanting in addition to what we have tonight?
No,
That I can help you with?
Thank you, you did a good job of putting this together.
Thank you. This is not, I don't like doing this. I'm not a,
And it's not.
I think just some of the questions,
Every-
you know,
I may hit you up just so I fully understand.
sure,
So-
yeah,
and
absolutely.
maybe if we could have Ben here and Chris and that way we can
I think
talk.
that would be
We're
very
gonna-
helpful, having been here.
But how is Chris, by the way?
Sorry?
Chris, how is he?
Good.
I thought he had the shingles.
He did last week or week before, but I haven't heard too much complaining, so it must be better.
Everybody good?
Yeah.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate it.